There's nothing playing, Drew.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
All right, everybody, and we're still working out the kinks of our new introduction there. So
We'll get there someday.
maybe next week it'll flow a little better. As always, this is Andrew and John. This is Sasquatchers, and this week we have a really cool guest for the 17th episode. You may know him from his YouTube channel that is called Beyond the Path. Some of you might know him as being an admin in our own group on Facebook. And just want to extend a nice Sasquatchers warm welcome to William Hatfield. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. You know, we've been corresponding a lot since you joined the group, and I've always been happy to see your posts and I watch your videos. So I guess before we get super into anything, Bigfoot or cryptid heavy, I guess maybe just want to ask how it is that you came to take this up as a hobby.
Well, I've always been interested in cryptids, monsters, legends, and I'm in my early 50s, so I figured that I don't have too much time left, so I better get on it if I want to be, get into something like this. And I've just always been interested since I was a child. And as far as filming goes, I've always been a movie buff and enjoyed how movies were made. I've always enjoyed watching behind the scenes, just little tricks that people use to make scenes better and more entertaining. And it's just something that I just go after, man. You got to go after what you want, because tomorrow's not guaranteed,
Yeah, absolutely. You said you're a movie buff. What are some films that you're into?
Oh man, I have so many adventure, horror, classic, science fiction. I'm a fan of a lot of directors, Spielberg, Lucas, of course, John Carpenter, Clive Barker, Stephen King, just all kinds of people I get inspired by, and I find inspiration in a lot of different places, not just in movies, but in music and books, and I just find it everywhere, really.
Yeah, when you have a muse, it's nice to seek out what it's telling you, so to speak.
Yeah, and I wish more people felt that and had that in their life.
Yeah, and I respect what you do a lot. The stage of your life where you decided to do it is meaningless compared to the fact that you're doing it and you're going out and you're doing the work, and the hobby is I guess even more than a hobby really at that point, when you've taken on this job of going out and doing your research. And I agree with you.
Yeah, it's not really a hobby. I mean, because anything I put out like this is part of me, because I put a lot of work into it, because it's a lot of research and a lot of time. I'm self-taught in everything I do. I haven't had any training in filming or running cameras or anything like that. You know, I'm just learning as I go, and hopefully I put out things that are entertaining and maybe make people think a little bit. You know.
Well, as far as that goes, I think you do a good job. I think you go, I mean, I'll say above and beyond what others might, somebody might throw a GoPro on and just kind of expect that to kind of be their video, but you almost have this like Survivor Man, Les Stroud feel to your
Yeah.
work, which
It's it's funny you mention that because I don't learn and watch from a lot of people, but he's one of them. Les Stroud is one of them that I've watched a lot. Just the way he does his, his episodes and his films and everything, with his camera work, and because he's the real deal, man. I mean, I don't know if you
yeah.
ever watched his show, but he's the real deal. I mean, he's a no bullshit kind of guy, and that's the type of people I like to learn from.
Yeah, the Survivor Man show I thought was fantastic, and that kind of hit at a time when the Survivor shows were like the you had obviously the what was the I forgot. Well, you have Dual Survival, which was one I was super into, and that was kind of on around the same time. But with all of the survival shows that were out there, like he stood out because he was the only one going out without a crew, and then on top of doing his uh, maybe not research, but he did eventually do that Bigfoot special. But
Yeah,
on
and
top
I
of
learned a lot about Bigfoot from that show too. Because he delved in because he kind of broke it down of, what else could it be? Like tree bends and tree structures. He mentioned that back in the day, settlers would use that to mark their way as they're crossing the land.
okay, so if you happen upon something like that now, um, with that information, is that something that you consider when you see it, and then you kind of just maybe assume that that's actually not Sasquatch related, and because you have that information, or do you still
Well,
kind of have an air of uncertainty about it?
well, I've come across strange tree structures where, like, let's see here, trees like this, and then it falls in the middle, but the bottom of the tree where it would fall would break from the ground. There was no
Yeah.
root system, and this was deep in the woods. There was no root system at the bottom, because I looked around the area where there might be the root system. You know, I think it's in one of my videos. I can't remember, but I also look around the area and just what it could be. There's a root system, then possibly it could be, rot or weather, or it could be something else. Squatch coming by and pushing it down. And it's just whenever I find tree structures like that, I always look around the area for any footprints as well.
Have you found a significant amount of prints? That seems to be
I've
something they.
I found one print, but I mean, it was on the shore of Lake Monroe where people don't go, because that's what I try to do when I go out is go deep in the wilderness where people don't go. And I found a
Right.
print, but it could have been somebody from a boat that happened to stop in that area and got off for whatever reason and then jump back on or whatever. I mean, just I try to look at it like with a detective's eye if I can.
Yeah, I see a lot of prints out here, not personally, but posted in the Facebook groups and stuff in Pennsylvania. And I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
question them, and until I happen upon one myself to inspect with that lens of being a detective with it, it's difficult to. I don't want to write them off, but for me, it's hard to take other people's photos of prints seriously
Yes,
because
yes,
who
yeah,
knows
I
what shoe
agree.
they have
Yeah,
on.
right, right.
There's known hoaxers all over the internet. Every day there's something new.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
why I try to stay away from all that. I don't really get involved in that. I try to not post about that or anything like that, because a lot of people out there have a lot of hoaxes and a lot of thoughts on this thing, and if you disagree with them, they tend to attack you. So I kind of keep my mouth shut and let my videos talk for me.
Yeah. I've had an idea lately of taking on the role of somebody that breaks down videos and exposes hoaxes. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a like
And in any of my videos, I've never claimed anything. I just kind of talked about the research that I've learned about and the stories that I've heard. I would love to come across a creature like this, see it with my own eyes. And I'm smart enough to know if I got something like this on camera, most people would laugh it off and consider it a hoax. But there's a few people that might take it serious. But at least I would know. And that's what
yeah,
I'm after. You know.
you would know, and for those two people that aren't laughing, that could
Right,
be
right,
life
right,
changing or world changing to those two people.
right.
So that's something that's important to always keep in mind when you're out there doing that. But you brought up how you go over your research, and that's something that, in my opinion, is one of my favorite things that you offer, because it's not just you going out there with your cameras and filming and trying to look for stuff, but you're also educating almost while you're doing it with all of the backstories and the I like the way that you correlate the information that you're giving us to the area that you're researching at the time.
Well, thank you, thank you. And I think that's important too. You got to tell the story of what's happening, and if it's a good story, then people will listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that you were into other cryptids. Is there anything specifically non-Bigfoot related that you're like super into, or that you're hoping to maybe find one day?
Yeah, like the Skinwalker, the Dogman. I just finished recording the lake monster video I put together about different lake monsters around the country and up in Canada and Scotland. I have a wide range of, you know, cryptids, paranormal, UFOs that I'm interested in. And it's what I like to say is like, we're all asking questions that may never have an answer, but to find those answers takes a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication, and don't get wrapped up on all the other, you know, cobwebs of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also not to get wrapped up in the cobwebs of these paranormal channels and the TikTokers and everybody else that are trying to be famous and to make a buck and to kind of be the next ghost hunters or in the next TV show or something to that effect.
Right, right. I I don't want to follow people. I don't want to be like everybody else. That's why I'm not, trying to copy everybody else and put out the same type of videos. I want to be different and entertaining, and hopefully I pull that off. You know, and I'll never say my stuff is good because it's not for me to say. It's for other people to say. So I just kind of put my heart into what I put together, and hopefully people like it. And I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody or clickbait anybody or lie to anybody, about what I've just the information I've learned about, and I'm putting it together in a package film, and hopefully people like it.
Yeah, it's genuine authenticity from
Yeah,
start to
yeah,
finish, and that's again one of the things that drew me originally to watching them once I saw the links for them, and just you out there in the wilderness doing your thing. I'm curious, where do you stand on some of the lake monster stuff? I know that you did your video. I can't remember what episode. Maybe John would remember, but we have a lake monster episode that it was more of a casual episode where had just kind of a lot of banter, and we didn't get crazy into the science behind a lot of stuff. But I originally got into this stuff for a couple of reasons, and the first being Dogman. So I'm glad you mentioned Dogman because I think that would be a fun topic for us to broach at some point in this conversation. But also lake monsters, and I remember being like, I don't know, maybe 13 years old and watching the specials on the Discovery Channel about the Loch Ness monster, and like I would literally be watching it, and like maybe a cousin's next to me, and I look over to it, and I'm like, I'm gonna do that someday. Like just like this, the idea of hunting these creatures, and not even for sport, but for science, has always
Yeah.
piqued my interest. So I think what we basically kind of came up with was that there possibly could be an underwater channel system where maybe not even multiple monsters could be bouncing back and forth, but specifically in our Great Lakes, that there might be, we have what Chessie, right, from Chesapeake Bay. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Maybe that whatever that creature would be, able to then find a channel that goes deeper than we're aware of, and then bounce back and forth between all of the lakes, and then it might be responsible for all of these sightings.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the underwater channels because I just did a story on a lake monster that may use underwater channels to it's out in out west. I can't remember exactly where it's at. I'm sorry, but yeah, it may use underwater channels to get from lake to lake because it's been seen in other lakes. So it's a possibility. I mean, I'm not just going to discount anything. Some of these lake monster stories and other stories are fantastic. But the possibility is pretty much there of these things being real. I mean,
What do you think?
Who's to say they're not some mutated animal or species?
I was just going to ask, what your take is on what you might think that they are, because I've seen people propose that that it's the giant eel theory, that it's just an oversized eel, and because of its size, that it is actually scientifically not able to reproduce. So possibly, like for instance, Loch Ness monster at one time was just a giant eel out in the loch, and then it wasn't able to reproduce because it was sterile because of it. And I guess that's like a legit science explanation. I actually saw that on Penn and Teller's Bullshit about 20 years ago. Where they, as big of a fan as I am of them in that show, they just pretty much put everything that we talk about and care about on blast. And that's one of the episodes that they did that on. But again, they found that scientific explanation that even a lot of people aren't willing to accept or even propose. And I've always kind of been curious if it was maybe one of that scenarios with the giant eel.
It's a possibility, and plus another theory is that it ran out of food and starved to death because it's so big and it needs so much food to sustain itself.
Right. How did you get into Dogman? For me, growing up and hearing about the Beast of Bray Road was kind of the catalyst for the Dogman, and between that and the Moth Man, actually, where John and I grew up, that's where they filmed the Mothman prophecies. So they actually turned our whole town.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, like, we grew up in, like, the town that we grew up in, it was changed for that film, and nothing was ever switched back. So, the entire town was turned into, Point Pleasant and just stayed like Point Pleasant. Up, it still looks like that to this day. So,
I'm gonna have to rewatch that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, that movie's awesome, and, like, everyone that I know from that town is in it, and I have a family who are all in it, and our giant courthouse is, prominently displayed there.
If you actually go, if you actually go to Point Pleasant, they look very similar.
Okay. Yeah. But you were asking, how I got into Dogman and stuff. Well, I don't know much about like Dogman, Skinwalker, Moth Man. I know the first layer of these things, but I know Bigfoot a lot more because I've researched him a lot more. But as the new year approaches 2024, I'm going to get more into other cryptids and do more videos on other cryptids as well. But also, I'm going to do more videos on Bigfoot too, where I go out into the wilderness. And my goal is to head out in your area, what is it, June, and then a couple other places like Kentucky and Ohio, and just see what happens.
Ohio is a bit of a hotbed for activity, and
Yeah,
that's actually
yeah,
that's close. That's closer to John's neck of the woods. But I they have everything from Bigfoot, Dogman to the Melonheads, which
Yeah.
are an interesting group
I
to
live
look
I live
into.
5 minutes from the Melonheads, if you're familiar with them. And I just recently discovered this when we were talking about them on an episode. I was like, we looked up the name of where they were at, and I was like, wait a minute, that's 5 minutes from my house. Like that's just over here.
right. Yeah. But
But
as a
also Kentucky's a good one too.
Yeah.
yeah. But as a filmmaker, a storyteller, stories like the Dog Man, Moth Man, Skinwalker, Bigfoot. I mean, there's just an open, book of information on these things that you could tell different stories about these creatures. And what's cool is that the possibility of them being real, is there.
I think very strongly that they are real. It's not even like a so much a belief anymore, but I think something that a lot of people will often bring up, and they pick and choose, and it's the Native Americans. So most people, even if they're not believers of the paranormal, or even so much as something as simple as hauntings or ghosts, will always still cite like that was an Indian burial ground. Stay away from that. Um, things are weird over there, and
Yeah,
if
a
you,
lot of these stories go back to that native time. Yeah, for sure.
right,
A lot of
and
connections there.
I take I take their myths and their lores pretty seriously
Oh,
because
as myself. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and like I was saying, like even people that otherwise don't care about this kind of stuff always put a little bit of extra weight to that. So
yes.
when I'm looking in this particular area, that's kind of the weight that I like to carry with it too, because I absolutely like the ancient peoples. I mean, they saw things. They didn't just make all of this stuff up that also correlates. And I'm not going to get into dragons or anything like that, but like specifically as an example, we have people in who are in no way, shape, or form communicating with each other in Asia who are drawing pictures of these creatures at the same time that people, deep in, the UK are drawing images of these creatures. And you can always argue that humans just aren't that creative, or um, there's not that much to us, so that it would have been possible that we're just both making things up at the same time. But with that same argument that causation isn't correlation, I feel like causation isn't correlation to discrediting something either.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So it's a really long-winded way of saying that I'm pretty certain that these things exist or have existed, and in what way or fashion we don't know yet, and we possibly never will. But a Dogman specifically, I think it's wretched. Like, you know, I think that there's something very sinister about Dogman versus Bigfoot. I mean, some stories, you know, harken a little bit of violence. It seems more territorial, you know, being protective of their land and keeping people away. Until yesterday, I had not heard a single story that ended violently in like death or injury of an encounter with a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So, like, to me, I feel like possibly,
it's rare that you hear violent stories about, you know, Sasquatch, but you do hear more violent stories about the Dogman. One story I heard was about a couple. They were just traveling around the country, and they happened to be going through that area, and they stopped on the side of the road because their car stranded, and they said they were attacked by, you know, what they think is a Dogman, you know. And as somebody who goes out to these places alone, to get up there in Michigan, that would be pretty intense to experience, whether I'm alone or even with a group of people, you know, just to be in that area and know their stories, you know, it's just pretty intense.
yeah, certainly. And that's, again, that's the thing. I don't know. When you just kind of think of like a Dogman or a werewolf, at some point somebody coined the phrase Dogman and everybody ran with it. And I don't know if that's because werewolf is almost too fantastical or something, but I mean, as far as we know, that's what these creatures are, in some form of transformed human or something to that effect. So I don't know if Dogman and werewolf technically are classified together or not, but it's always definitely like a scarier experience, whereas Bigfoot almost can kind of be seen as like the protector of nature. And
yeah, since you mentioned that, there are some groups that will put Bigfoot in with the other animals that resemble like truth, honor, respect, and, you know, they'll have Bigfoot in that lineup too, with something along the lines of love or something along that line. You know.
so I have a question for you, and this comes up specifically because I had posted our Bigfoot episode that we recorded yesterday. And one of the groups, I had somebody respond and asked about just our logo. It's this logo right here for anybody that's ever going to watch this video, directly behind me, where I have, you know, the UFO and stuff. And it's just basically just a banner that kind of encapsulates everything that we do here on this show. But I was like scolded for having Bigfoot and a UFO together. And there's actually a lot of people who, you know, will put Bigfoot and aliens together. And then there's the interdimensional travel theory. And so many people have had encounters where I just heard one on a different podcast. And I don't remember what episode it was, but it's the Lost Frequency podcast. And I highly, highly recommend anybody, you know, if you listen to podcasts and if you're listening to this, definitely check them out because they're great. But there was an episode where somebody was on this show talking about an encounter and he witnessed a portal being opened for Bigfoot to walk into. So you strike me as somebody who's out there in the woods and almost scientifically kind of looking at things. So I wanted to maybe get your opinion about the paranormal aspect that's kind of attached itself to Bigfoot over the last 15 years or so.
Well, there's a lot that we don't know about the universe, about time, space, and there's been many stories of people say that they see a Bigfoot run around a tree and just disappear. And And I've been out in the woods. You're going to see something run around a tree, but you're also going to see it run around the other side. You know, I want to believe, as silly as that sounds, I want to believe that it's something special. That it uses portals, time, space. You know, be possibly aliens. You know how some people say that aliens are here and already watching us. Who's to say that these Bigfoot creatures are not the aliens and they're watching us? You know, I mean, there's so many questions, but just so few solid answers. And the best way to, you know, find those answers is to dig hard and go out in the field and search. You know, even if not just Sasquatch, but you know, ghosts. Go to these places that are haunted. Research the area. UFOs. Search the skies. You know, that's how you find the answers. Really.
Yeah. And with that point, I just kind of had a thought pop into my head. And I'm sure others have maybe discussed this in the past, but what are the possibilities that Bigfoot could possibly be a government agent, so to speak, and this is something that was lab created and used by the military?
Well, that's a possibility too. But then again, I think about the government, and I think, man, they're just not that smart. But then again,
Yeah, it's always
it
a
could
fair
be, man.
opposition.
You know, yeah, you know, I mean, it could be. You know, until we have solid answers, you know, I guess we'll never know. And but the thrill is looking for those answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the UFO thing, I cannot say that I've ever, bear witness to a Sasquatch, but 2017, I witnessed a UFO uh, phenomena right here in the town that I live in, and it was on the 4th of July. And I talked to Preston Dennett about it when we had Preston Dennett on, and he kind of validated that a little bit because he said that in his research that that tends to be a day that has a lot of activity. And when we first saw, because there was 4 of us that witnessed this, when we first saw it, I had assumed that it was a firework, the Chinese lantern or something, where it kind of like real casually floats up and then eventually dissipates. But what had happened was this, this sphere. I don't know. Some people might call it the orb, but just like this ball of light comes up and it just hangs there for a minute, and I'm like, oh man, check that out. There's fireworks, and then it just doesn't do anything, and then a minute or so goes by, and then it turns into 3 of them, and then they start to kind of like dance around, and like I described it as like light ballet, where they're almost performing for us watching, and that went on for about 45 minutes, and then back to one, and then shot off. So I have not yet encountered a Bigfoot. I have tried very hard to seek out other paranormal activities such as ghost hunting and whatnot. I went out when I was younger with the Ouija board and did seances and took cameras out and just chaotically. There was no method or science to anything that I did. So I never experienced anything other than that UFO phenomenon, and so I know wholeheartedly what I saw, so that when somebody says that they have encountered a Bigfoot and they have a story, I tend to believe, these people are these are not made up. And
No, no. A lot of people have grand stories, and I'm not going to discount them. You know, right off. I mean, because I don't know what they saw. I don't know what they heard. I wasn't there. I don't know the area. I mean, I'll listen to them. It sounds cool, you know. But I mean, when I hear these grand stories, I want to put myself in these places. I want to experience that, you know. And that's just the emotion I feel when I hear these stories that people talk about Bigfoot, and believe me, the rabbit hole for Bigfoot goes deep and far. I mean, I've come across people that say they have a mental connection with these creatures, that they're able to talk to them with their minds. I've come across people who say that they have exchanged gifts with these creatures. I mean,
I've heard the story of a woman that had a relationship with a Bigfoot.
Wow.
So
No, I was gonna
talk about that.
I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to use that word relation because because just the thought of doing that is pretty heavy.
The one thing that every single person who talks about Bigfoot tends to agree on is that they stink terribly and are repugnant and smell like a landfill. So I can only imagine what that relationship may have been like if something like that is actually true.
They make Axe body spray.
Yeah. Some people are into some odd things.
There's a really entertaining episode. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Art Bell or not, but there was a really entertaining episode of his show where there was a woman who called in and talked about this Bigfoot that lived kind of in her backyard. And she did a whole episode with this woman who would talk about her interactions and experiences with Sasquatch. And obviously anybody could be out there making these noises, but while she's talking about these sometimes ludicrous things, you hear the whoops in the background, and I mean it's not right next to her. If it was faked, and being that it was on Art Bell, who knows, because the show is about entertainment first more than anything, but it was really well done, and it got to a point where it seemed like everything that she was saying was just like for entertainment value, but yeah, this woman said that for years there was a Sasquatch family that shared land with them, and it was never a violent thing, or they never imposed on each other. And she would bake pies and put them out, and then they would come and take them off of the porch. And like you mentioned, like the exchanging of gifts, that seems to be a pretty popular thing. But she also talked about that, or when she would dry her clothes, they would come and take the clothes off of the hanger. So, like, you can just imagine like Bigfoot walking around in like some like nightgown or something.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny to see.
It's not always even scary, and some of the interactions that you hear about are downright comical. So it is such an enigma, and I'm really looking forward to when we go out to do our research as a group.
Yeah, it should be interesting for sure. Sure, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure that we'll find anything, but the thrill of the hunt really is part of
that. That's where it's at for me. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely the adventure. I mean, we all want the grand prize, but the journey's where it's at.
Okay, so grand prize just kind of opened this question up, and I know where I stand on things, but I think from now on when we have Bigfoot discussion, I'm going to ask this question. So you're in the woods, you encounter the Bigfoot, it's in front of you, 10 yards away, dead to rights. Are you the type of person, like, do you think in that situation somebody should fire on it and have that body to prove once and for all that this is a real living creature?
Well, yeah. On a serious tip, if I don't think you should try to annihilate this creature, or really any creature, to study it. We have the technology and the ability these days to study these things, that we could use a training dart, knock it out for a few hours, study it, and then let it wake up and send it on its way. It kind of hurts me on the inside when I hear people talk about how they want to go out and hunt it and get the body. But I mean, that's okay. But there's ways to do it without killing it. You know, you don't have to kill it. You know.
Yeah, that's my take as well, especially with technology now. But yeah, you do have those people, for sport, and unfortunately, in science, a lot of times you still see that with certain creatures, to be studied. And I guess when you're a biological anomaly, people, for some reason, want to see you opened up on a table.
That's why they're after me. Now, what if I'm hunting the Bigfoot for food? Let's say I use all of its parts. Is that acceptable?
Well, I mean, if you're into cannibalism, I guess. You know. But that reminds me of a movie I recently watched. I don't know if you've seen it, called Willow Creek. It's directed by Bob K. Go with comedian. It's a Bigfoot story, and the ending got me thinking, because couples out in the woods, they hear the traditional sounds of Bigfoot, and then at the end of the movie you find out it's not a Bigfoot, it's actually real people out there, that's been living in the woods and living their life out there,
Yeah, it
just made me think, yeah, it could be people out there, actually real people living out in the woods, doing these things.
For whatever reason, I have always kind of envisioned Bigfoot to have more of a sapien style face versus kind of the ape one that it's always, typically portrayed with. For me, like I almost, for whatever reason, I've never even seen this show. It's way before my time, but Andre the Giant as Sasquatch for what I believe was an episode of The $1 Million Man.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I've always envisioned.
Yeah, sort of man-like face, but big and hairy and stealthy.
Yeah, so that's kind of cannibalism, I think, would be what you're, essentially doing if you were to eat any part of a Sasquatch, because that's always been my take on him, at least. As far as the other cryptids that Bigfoot's out there with, like, I just, again, it's just such a drastic change in interaction. It just seems like it once left alone, and they're just out there doing their thing. But I have not seen that movie. I've been aware of it forever, and something that I've been thinking about doing just for fun, for Sasquatchers, is to do like a top 10 Bigfoot movies, or something to that effect, and just kind of go live and have a live discussion about Bigfoot on film and cinema. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing to do. There's I don't want to sound like a prude or anything, but when it comes to a lot of movies, not just Bigfoot movies, the storyline might be great, but if the acting isn't believable, I just can't get into it.
Yeah, well, I grew up mainly on trash cinema, so usually that is something I'm able to get by, because I watch a lot of like low budget B. Grew up on Troma. Troma is one of my favorite movie studios.
Oh yeah, as myself, I might watch something just because of the storyline. The storyline is what it's about for me.
There is a pretty, I don't know, it's a pretty rad Bigfoot horror film called Night of the Demon that came out in the 70s, and there's a Severin Blu-ray of it that came out a couple of years ago, and that's one if you've never seen, if you're just kind of in for the monster movie take. And unfortunately with Bigfoot, that's something that you see in cinema a lot, it's the sensationalized violence and horror. I can only think of Harry and the Hendersons off the top of my head as what's kind of a wholesome story about Sasquatch, actually, at least in my lifetime. All of the films other than that seem to really paint it as a monster and use it as a monster for, blood and gore.
Yeah, they got to dramatize it, I guess, and make it, I guess, exciting. And I wish that somebody would come along and make a movie about Bigfoot that's more real, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, "Oh, well, that's what you're going to do," But when we go out and we do our investigation, we are going to take cameras, and obviously, when you go out, you're doing that same thing. And you take your cameras, and that's kind of what you're doing, is just looking for the real earthly aspect of what's going on. So I'm hoping that we can provide something of value, and it is just one night. And as far as I know, there could be 100 of us out there, making too much noise and chasing them all away. But that's really what my goal is for this excursion that we're doing. And, I am thrilled and honored that I'm not even going to call it, maybe I will, like almost a half-wit idea that I had of, we should have a Sasquatchers excursion where we go, investigate.
Well, that's where it starts,
thing.
is with the idea, and you got to run with it. You got to stick with it and just follow through with it. And once you get through it, it's the sense of achievement, that's priceless, when you do things like this, because I go out alone and I do all the work, and I'm not bragging by any means, it's just like when I'm done and I'm sitting here thinking about it, that sense of achievement, because I set a goal and I followed through and I made it happen. And that shows me that I can do that in other aspects of my life as well,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's perfect example of how Sasquatch is, can literally help you in your day-to-day life,
Yeah. Somebody once said that once you dive into the rabbit hole of Bigfoot, your life will never be the same. And they weren't lying. They weren't lying at all. It's definitely a road that I recommend more people go down, but don't believe everything you see and everything you hear. Study everything you see and hear.
Yeah, we talked about it real briefly in the group today. That kind of Bigfoot's everywhere now. It seems like more and more people are kind of embracing it almost as that bumper sticker that everybody wants to have, and it's on cars.
Yeah, it's everywhere, dude. Cars, soap, shampoo labels. I mean, T-shirts, movies, just everywhere, man. And it's just crazy how I'll say that I'm doing videos on Bigfoot, and I'll get either two reactions, like, "Oh, that's cool," or they'll laugh at me. So, and I'm sure a lot of other people get that same thing, but you can't let that stop you on anything.
Yeah, and I feel like we're at a point in time now where you're gonna get less laughs and more people are gonna give you that, like, "Oh man, that's cool" reaction. And I think that's a really good progress that's been made. More people are now coming out with sightings, and a couple of years ago, I've lived in this area for about 10 years now, and I'd never heard anything about this, interaction. And then just all of a sudden, now Bigfoot's everywhere, and now people are talking about it. And here I find somewhere that's 45 minutes from my house, people have been going out on excursions for years and yielding results. So I think whatever has created the situation where Bigfoot's now kind of a totem is it's a positive thing, because people who otherwise wouldn't interact with people like us are not even thinking twice about it any longer.
Yeah, that's true. because I come from a time when you talked about Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, people would look at you like you're crazy. And they would always keep it behind closed doors. But now, there are a lot of people that's come out and more accepting. I mean, you still get the people that laugh at you, but that's on them. It's just you got to accept it as it comes.
Yeah, and actually, I have another question. Where do you stand on the Patterson Gimlin film? I think most people within the community that we're a part of tends to all agree that it's a legit film, but obviously there's plenty of people who have been crying that it's fake, and you even had the gentleman, I can't remember his name. I want to say it was, the last name started with an H, who even had a recreated suit and claimed that he was the one doing it. That's good. That's making rounds on the internet, is people reposting that, what I feel is false information. But what's your take on that 8mm film from the 60s?
Well, that film there is one of the things that I have done a lot of research on my own. I've heard about the guy you're talking about with the suit. There's been other people that come out and say, they were also in the suit or whatever, and but also people that study the way people walk, the way the foot moves, has also studied this film, and the way they talk about the way this thing steps and moves. Humans don't do that. And plus, you could see the muscle movement in the body. And at the time, they didn't have the technology to make suits that advanced, where the muscles would move as you walk. So if there's anything out there that I would believe when it comes to the Bigfoot world, it would be that film. Because I have seen countless videos, I've read countless reports on this thing, and there's some that are very interesting and leave me scratching my head. But that film is just one of the best films out there of this creature because of the way science has studied it.
Yeah, and it still holds up to this day. And the fact that with the technology that we have, where you should be able to take a video from the 60s and say without a doubt 100% this was a hoax. Here's the seams on the suit. Here's the evidence that we can pinpoint with all of technology that we have in 2023. It still doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. That film to me is concrete. There has been nothing that could interfere with my opinion about that. And what drives me crazy, and I got into this on the last episode, so I don't want to get into a super crazy rant about it, but the idea that a person can stake a claim in something and people will take a person's word as fact versus the evidence that has been presented and call that a hoax because somebody said he wore a suit. When the easiest way to hoax would be to take credit for something that you didn't do, a simple lie. And because it's about Bigfoot, everybody just takes him at his word when, with the skeptical brain that they have, that it gives them the validation because for whatever reason they can't accept that they're seeing something unexplained in front of them. I don't know what
definitely.
it is.
Well, for me, with my science eye, you're gonna have to come along with more than just saying you've got a suit, and I was the man in the suit out there. You're gonna have to come to me with more than that, for me to get to believe that, and for people to believe this guy just because he has a suit. Well, I think that's pretty close-minded of them. They should open their minds a little bit and maybe look at it a little deeper.
Yeah, it's not hard to sit there and watch a 2-minute clip and, you know, take a look at the science. We're on computers all the time, constantly. There's a computer in our hand every second of the day now. You know, a little bit of research goes a long way on this. And I'm seeing it all over the Bigfoot groups now on the internet. And the suit that the guy even recreated is awful. The legs almost look real baggy, like a ghillie suit. And like you said, man, that muscle mass, you see that, and you see, different inflections with the way the skin and the hair look from shoulder to the hind quarter. That's not a suit, especially right around the same time period. You have Planet of the Apes, a big budget Hollywood movie, all the money in the world, and that's what their Hollywood apes looked like at the time.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It just makes no sense to me at all.
Right.
I can't wait for the day I ask that question and somebody tells me that it's fake, because it's going to make for interesting radio for sure.
Oh, no doubt. I think there's something out there. What it is, I don't know. And that's part of the reason why I go out and search for this thing. Because I want to know, and it's just a fun journey to do this. Meet interesting people and explore some pretty cool places. Life's good when I go out.
And if for no other reason to go out and do it, that's a perfect reason to do it, because like you said, like, life's good when you do it. It's what brings you your peace and your calm in this crazy world. So I think what you do is awesome, and I always enjoy the videos and our interactions together. Like, we're hitting that hour mark. We always like to kind of keep this at about an hour, not to take up too many people's time. Go ahead, and we have, you can see the ticker there on the bottom. We have your channel there, but if you have anything else to promote, or I don't know if you have any other shows that you're going to be on that you want to plug, but all you.
This is really the only show that I had I planned to be on for a while, but I just finished a lake monster video about a series of lake monsters around the country. That's pretty interesting, I think. I'm on YouTube, on Facebook. I'm paying attention to this podcast and this Facebook group here. You'll see me around the internet, and I'll be releasing more videos next year for sure. Be going to some different places.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that for sure. So when I hit the end record button, I like to always have you guests stay on just for a minute or two to make sure that we have all of the audio, so that we didn't just waste 58 minutes of your time. But I want to just thank you here on the air for coming on and talking about what you do and indulging me in this podcast. Some people might not be as forthcoming as you, so I do appreciate it. And every episode, I always kind of start to mumble and bumble on at the end, but ultimately, I think what you do is impressive. I like your take. I like the way that you handle yourself when you're out there. I like the presentation. I think everybody listening should definitely check out the links and, watch these videos, because this guy's out there and he's doing the work. This isn't somebody who's trying to get famous on YouTube or TikTok. This is legitimate research by a legitimate person. So I just, again, want to thank you for your time and apologize that I'm going to subject you to our silly outro now.
No, that's fine. But hey, thanks guys for having me, man. It's been my pleasure.
All right.
It's been awesome.
Yep. Thank you.
If you like the show, please like, follow, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thanks for squatching.
Squatch you later.